What if the most dangerous person you will ever meet doesn't raise their voice, doesn't argue, doesn't compete, doesn't even seem ambitious? They just sit quietly while everyone around them slowly hands them the keys. There is a type of intelligence they never teach you. You won't find it in classrooms. It doesn't shine and it doesn't need applause. It works in shadows, quiet, invisible, and surgical. You have felt this type before. The man who never raises his voice, but somehow controls the entire room. The woman who smiles politely while seeing more than anyone realizes. They don't speak often, but when they do, people listen. Not because they are loud, but because their words carry a weight no one can quite explain. This is dark intelligence. And before we go further, let me say this clearly. This isn't about controlling people. It is about understanding them. Used poorly, what you are about to learn becomes manipulation. Used well, it becomes awareness. The difference is the person wielding it. Once you understand how this kind of mind is built, you will never see the world the same way again. This kind of mind doesn't react. It watches. It doesn't beg. It positions. It doesn't fight. It ends things quietly. If you have always known you are different, not softer, but sharper, this is for you. Because what is coming isn't a transformation. It is a metamorphosis. And the strangest part? No one will see it happening until it is already done. You don't begin by learning. You begin by observing. At first, you are just quiet. You listen to people long enough to hear the cracks in their stories. You smile at jokes that aren't funny, not because you are amused, but because you are watching who is desperate for approval. You are not cold. You are awake. Slowly, you start to see it. The world around you runs on a kind of quiet madness. People fight over things that don't matter. They defend lies to protect their egos. They talk loudly when they are afraid and pretend to be strong while falling apart inside. And once you start watching from a distance, you begin to see the code beneath the chaos. People are predictable when they think they are safe. You learn to ask the right questions, not to trap people, but to let them reveal themselves. You give them silence and let their discomfort fill the space. You let their emotions tell you what their words won't. And while they think you are harmless, you are learning. Quietly. Completely. There is a story about a young woman in Renaissance Florence, the daughter of a merchant. She was never the loudest at the dinner table or the most charming. She simply listened. She noticed which guests laughed too hard at her father's jokes, which ones complimented his wine while watching the silver, and which ones spoke of loyalty but couldn't meet his eye. By the time she was 25, she had quietly outmaneuvered every rival her family had. Not through force, through observation. She didn't need to fight. She just needed to know. And once she knew, everything else became simple. That is how it begins for everyone who eventually arrives at this place. The first thing people notice about you is your calm. You don't react like they expect. You don't flinch at insults or break down under pressure. Not because you are suppressing anything, but because you have quietly stepped off the leash that used to pull you. You don't suppress feelings. You study them. Your anger becomes analysis. Your sadness becomes strategy. Your fear becomes foresight. You no longer let your emotions choose your actions. You let them tell you something, and then you decide what to do. Think about a boardroom in crisis. Numbers down, deadline missed, blame flying across the table. The loud ones panic and point fingers. But there is one person at the end of the table who hasn't spoken yet. She is watching who blames others before checking their own work, who panics first, and who stays silent for the wrong reasons. By the time she finally speaks, the room has already told her everything she needs to know. That is the first trait. You stop being moved by storms and start studying the wind. You no longer just look at people, you read them. You watch their hands when they speak, their eyes when they avoid a question, and their tone when they want something. You hear what isn't said. You feel the shift in tension when someone is uncomfortable. You don't need them to confess because you already know. Talleyrand, the French diplomat who survived 5 different regimes, including the French Revolution and Napoleon, said almost nothing in negotiations. He simply watched. He noticed which delegate adjusted his collar before lying, which one rushed to fill silences out of insecurity, and which one's smile didn't reach his eyes. By the end of every negotiation, Talleyrand knew exactly what each man wanted, what each man feared, and what each man would compromise to get. He didn't manipulate, he simply saw. And in a world full of people performing, the one who actually sees holds all the leverage. That is the second trait. You stop hearing words and start reading the person behind them. When you walk into a room, you don't need to speak to be noticed. Your presence is intentional. Your silence is louder than most people shouting. Not because you are trying to be interesting, but because you are trying to be unhurried. You reveal just enough to be respected, but never enough to be reduced to a single impression. People stay attentive around what they cannot easily file away. You give them just enough depth to keep them curious. You have learned that power doesn't come from being everywhere. It comes from being missed when you are not there. Think about the most magnetic person you have ever encountered in a real setting. They didn't dominate the room or perform for it. They walked in, said little, and somehow became the center of gravity anyway. And when they left, the room felt smaller. That is not charisma. That is engineered presence. There is a reason kings throughout history kept their distance and spoke in measured rhythms while courtiers chattered. The peasant fights to be seen. The king is seen because he doesn't have to fight. You stop posting every thought, sharing every win, and explaining every move. Because what they cannot predict, they adjust to. And the moment they are adjusting to you, the dynamic has already shifted. That is the third trait. You stop performing for the room, and the room starts paying attention to you. Most people speak to fill silence. You speak to plant ideas. Every word is a move, measured, intentional, never wasted. You stop defending yourself, stop explaining your decisions, and stop reacting to disrespect. Because you now know that the strongest response is often no response at all. You never show your full mind. You don't share your goals with people who haven't earned that access. You don't let people know when they have hurt you, because reactions are receipts, and receipts can be used against you. There is an old saying among diplomats, speak only when your words are more powerful than your silence. Think about 2 people in a meeting. One spends 10 minutes defending their idea, loud, animated, and emotional. The other says one sentence, calm and precise. Have we considered what happens if this fails? Suddenly, the entire room turns. The first person's energy collapses because the quiet question reframed the entire conversation. That is strategic speech. Less, but heavier. Fewer words, but each one loaded. That is the fourth trait. You stop trying to be heard and start being remembered. This is the trait Machiavelli admired most, the transformation no one sees. When a person stops trying to fit into a broken world and starts quietly reshaping it, no one notices what they have become until it has already happened. They still think you are who you were 6 months ago. Still soft, still eager, still easy to read. They don't realize the person standing in front of them is fundamentally different. Think about the people in history who reshaped entire eras without ever raising their voice. Talleyrand survived 5 regimes. Cardinal Richelieu rebuilt France from the shadows behind a king. Catherine de' Medici outlasted 3 kings of France while everyone underestimated her. None of them dominated through force. They dominated through patience. They watched while others reacted, studied while others performed, and built quietly while others built loudly. By the time their rivals understood what was happening, it was already over. That is the model. That is the metamorphosis. It doesn't happen in public. It happens in the long, quiet hours when no one is watching. When you stop chasing approval, stop reacting, and stop revealing yourself to people who haven't earned access to your mind. One day, you look around, and the world has shifted around you. Not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped giving it permission to shape you. The people around you start to feel it. They don't always know what changed. They just know they handle you differently now. They don't interrupt you. They don't test you. They calibrate. And when they speak, they choose their words a little more carefully. That is not coincidence. That is the metamorphosis taking effect. Used poorly, this makes you cold and isolated. Used well, it makes you someone people trust with their truth, because you are finally someone who can hear it without flinching. The choice has always been yours. If this resonated with you, subscribe, because the work continues. And next time, we go even deeper into how the dangerously intelligent move through the world. I will see you there.